All right, guys, well, I know it's been a while since posted a video, but we are getting back on the Range Rover today and we are reassembling the motor. So for those that have been following along, unfortunately had a head gasket failure, which I have subsequently torn the entire motor down to a short block, and we are basically doing a complete overhaul of the motor, all the while we're in their tasks, while we have good access, and getting this thing back on the road as good as new. For those that aren't familiar with the truck, it's a 2011 Range Rover, so it's the last of the L322 chassis. It has the 5-liter V8 in it, and we're around 130,000 miles. So there's a lot of scheduled maintenance that needs to be done on these Range Rovers to keep them reliable once you kind of go past the 100,000 miles. Some of this had been done on the truck already, some had not, so we're gonna get that all done today. And as you saw in my previous video, we did all the kind of ancillary while we were in theirs already. This is going to be focused on the motor itself, putting it back together and getting to a point of the first start. So that's enough talking. Let's get over to the action and get this thing put back together. Super expensive head gasket. Well guys, not great news. You may have caught it on the time lapse, but I had a little bit of an issue when installing the passenger side cylinder head. Let me show you what happened. Here's the brand new head gasket, which looks fine, but unfortunately, we come down here, I managed to scratch the sealing surface ever so slightly. So something to consider if you are installing the cylinder heads with the exhaust manifolds on. The exhaust manifold gasket, it sticks below the cylinder head mating surface. So if you imagine the head with the manifold on probably weighs about 70 pounds and you're trying to kind of sneak it in there, it looked like I had about 3/4 of an inch of clearance between the cylinder head and the mating surface, but actually the exhaust manifold gasket was sticking down a little bit and it just dragged over the new head gasket. And especially after dealing with a blown head gasket, I cannot gamble on this. And so I've made the decision to order a new one. Unfortunately, that means a little bit of waiting, but once that comes in, we will get the other head on and we will be back in business. I'll try and keep it high. Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't say it was easy, but the cylinder heads are on. I will say putting them on with the exhaust manifold is a little bit of a challenge, and the L322 with the really single piece exhaust is a little tricky to get the collector to just drop in. Had to do some prying on the exhaust to kind of get the collector to line up with the little down pipes. But the heads are on, all the hardware is in. Also, one thing to note, with the 5-liter, these are your heater hoses right here. And I had to unbolt those to get the back head bolt in. So a little frustrating, but nonetheless, we have both heads on and now it's on to the torque sequence. The torque sequence on the cylinder heads is a 4-step process. We start with 20 Newton meters, then we go to 35, then we do 90 degrees and then 210. We're gonna get the 20 Newton meters done on both sides, then we'll come back, we'll do the 35, Then we've got to bust out the angle gauge and start doing the torque to yield specs. So let's get on with the first set. Well, we made it through the torque sequence. That was 80 steps when you factor in 20 head bolts and 4 steps each. I also want to call out, I misspoke earlier. The last step is 120 degrees, not 210. So keep that in mind if you are following along for this, because you only want to do 120 degree turn as the final step. Also, I must note, not head bolts, but required, this little guy here, this little guy here. These are 12 Newton meters. And then on this side, under the oil filter casting, you have the 1 bolt here. That's 25 Newton meters. And on the driver's side, it's the same. 1 here, 1 here, and then this guy lurking here with the same torque specs. And this left me with these guys, and for a minute I was scratching my head trying to remember where they went. So the 2 torques right here, I'm going to show you where those go first, and that's this guy right here. So if we tuck around the corner, you see this, it bolts to the cylinder head here, and equally, it's a little hard to see, but it does the same on the back of the head here. So we're going to get those installed. My guess is these will be 12 Newton meters as well. And last but not least, this guy right here, I'll show you where that goes. And that's this ground strap. Extremely important, or I'm sure you're going to have some running issues, but that bolts down on the side of the cylinder head as well. I'll get that bolted up and I'll show you where it's mounted once it's on. So we're at the step in the project where there are tons of little bits and pieces that have to start going back on. I will do my best to document all of them as I go. There's a lot of stuff here at the back of the motor, and that's what I'm going to be working on for now. So as I get the next piece and go to install it, I'll show you what it is, where it's going, and we will slowly start the process of building this motor back up. I've got to say though, I am super excited now the heads are on, and I definitely feel like I got some wind in my sails after this massive project. All right, well, the crossover tube here, not exactly sure what this is, but it's bolted to the head. Kind of see it tucked down there. And then when we move over here, peeking down there, it's bolted up as well. And there's the engine ground that I was referencing as well, so you can kind of see it hiding down there. But certainly do not forget to put that back on. I imagine once all the timing gear is on that it will be a royal pain to access otherwise. So next up for me, I'm gonna put the knock sensors on. I think I'm trying to just get the main harness all in place, and I think I've removed especially stuff coming from the back of the engine. So the knock sensors are a logical next step. That way I can get it plugged into the harness. So let's get those cleaned up and put in the valley. With the harness on, I've got the knock sensors bolts nipped up. We're gonna torque them to 20 Newton meters. With those torqued up, we're gonna get onto the coolant crossover. I want this in place just to make sure I get the wires routed where they need to go before plugging everything in. Also under here, you'll see I put a little bit of Vaseline just on the O-rings. This is just to make sure they don't pinch or anything while they're getting bolted up. I think I mentioned this earlier in the video too, but the coolant crossover is prone to failing on these, and as you can see, not easy to access once the motor's built up. So I opted to replace it. The one that was in there wasn't leaking or didn't have any signs of leaking. It's lurking in the back, but we have the coolant crossover in. It's nice and snug. I think the torque spec was something around 4 foot-pounds, so I think that's probably about like 6 Newton meters. Now this is in, I'm gonna mess around with the knock sensor harness, make sure we get that plugged in and also attached to this how it should. And we're also gonna get the solenoids plugged in at the back of the head as well. Okay, so I did a little investigation. This guy actually goes in the back of the intake manifold, so not gonna get plugged in for now. We will go ahead and clip these guys together. Like so. And I'll keep this forward so we don't forget it. All right, well, one step closer. Got this all nice. Actually decided that I'm gonna put the oil filter housing on here. It doesn't seem to get in the way of anything with the reassembly process. And there'll be one more thing off the bench. So I had actually cleaned this up earlier, but we'll give it one final wipe down. And I've used the same process here as I have basically anywhere else on these mating surfaces, where I use like a fine scraper just to get any material off, and then a Scotch pad with some parts cleaner just to scrub it and then wipe it all down clean. It seems to be really effective, and it doesn't, score or damage the mating surface. These were the 3 that were inside the housing. This is the one that was outside. And I spent a good amount of time cleaning as much as I possibly could outside the housing. This motor really didn't have too much sludge buildup. Just, you can kind of see just on the corners a teeny bit, but I wanted to get as much out as possible, as this is a great opportunity to do that. And the head gasket kit came with this new metal gasket. And from what I can tell, this guy, which is the exterior one, I'll just be kind of cautious here. Let's get things started. Okay, I think this gives you guys a much better idea of kind of what we're working with here. Obviously, I might be in the way a little, but let's see if we can get this done up. So it appears to be threading in here. I'm just using one of these T-handles to go nice and slow to start. Okay, and the spec on these is supposed to be 12 Newton meters. So let's give this a try. Seems to be kind of common for these Torx bolts. Let's go nice and slow. And I'm going to kind of work my way around so I don't put too much pressure on one part of this. It does also seem to work as a kind of crush gasket because it's steel. I'm just going to go around and check them one last time. So, quick snapshot of where we are at. There's the oil filter housing on now. The reason I did this too is I can just put something in the top here to protect it. Easy to keep sealed up. One more thing off the bench. One less hole for me to potentially drop anything down. I think I mentioned this earlier. Intake runners are sealed up for a similar reason. We've got the coolant crossover in. It's torqued up. We have the NOx sensors in as well, which is great. We have the harness plugged in here, 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 and over here. There you go. So we got this guy. This goes on the back of the intake manifold, so we're keeping it forward. And we have this kind of dummy, which I recall just clipped into somewhere. So I think this may go on once the intake goes on as well. You can kind of see here we have these to clip in. So kind of had it pulled forward so I don't forget anything. With that, I've avoided it long enough. I have to get under the truck. I'm going to do the exhaust collectors up. I'll do my best to film that. Underneath it's a little tricky and cramped. Going to get those done up nice and tight. And then there's one like heat shield I need to put on over the O2 sensor harness as well. But that should get everything as far as connecting the engine up to the rest of the powertrain done underneath for now. And then really, I think we're getting pretty close to start putting the timing components on the motor, which is super exciting and a huge milestone. It's hard to believe that it's that time, but the cams are about to go back in. So I've taken a few minutes just to go over the mating surfaces, the cam journals one last time to make sure that they are free of any foreign materials or anything like that before we start introducing oil. And as you can see, they are looking really good. And just another glimpse of this side. As you can see, also looking great. So that means it's time to get over to the bench where I had everything laid out and prepped to get these lifters back in. That's it's been a little while. This is just a reminder of what we've had sitting here while we've been working on the project. Everything laid out exactly where it came from, so we remember exactly where to put it back. So it's time to introduce some oil into the equation. Where all the lifters go needs oiling. So I'm going to drop some oil down there, and then obviously we need to oil on top of the lifters as well before introducing the cams. Cam journals are going to need oil. So there's a lot of steps with adding some oil for lubrication while we do reassembly, but let's start the process. Well, 32 steps back and forth to the bench and the lifters are in. So you can see them here. We've got oil on everything. I took some time to lubricate anywhere the lifters would be riding and a little drop on top of the valves themselves. And then the lower cam journals I've also lubricated all the way to the back. You'll see some's run down kind of where the fuel injector and spark plugs are going to go and also where the valve cover is going to seal up. Once all the cams are in, timing set, we'll give that a nice clean up. But for now, want to make sure there's sufficient lubrication as we put this back together. And for those that might be doing this the first time, it's important that all of these go back where they came from. So that's why I had it laid out the way I did on the bench. And you'll see on the upper lifters, the hydraulic ones, there's a little keyway down here. Try and zoom in for you. There you go. And you need to line this up for them to seat down properly. So make sure that's in, or else your lifter might be jamming up and you could cause damage to the cam. And then yeah, you just gotta go down, and like I said, 32 trips later, you'll have everything back in here. So now for the more daunting piece, we have to get the cams lined up. And this is where we're gonna have to start using the timing tools to get everything in place, but also not risk damaging the valves. Well, it's time. Got to get that timing gear on. So I've got everything lined up. We got all the new parts laid out. We have to get to work getting the guides, tensioners, the chains on, the cam gears, everything in preparation to have all the timing gear on the front of the motor. And then once it's on, we're gonna have to roll the motor over a couple times, make sure everything is as anticipated. So I just realized that I forgot to hit play on one of my cameras, and so I thought I'd do a quick recap of what I've got done over here. And specifically, I wanted to show you one of the timing tools. It's the one that you use when you are torquing the cam phasers to the camshafts, because I think it's pretty critical, and it's a little, I'll say, out of the ordinary, at least from other jobs like this I've done in the past. So I thought I'd do a quick recap, show you how to use that and why, and then we can get on with the job. So filming this, mainly in case I forgot, but you can see our timing mark lined up here and our timing mark lined up here. Unfortunately, I just put the lower timing cover on, which I did film. So I'll pop up a picture here and show you where the other timing marks are lined up. If you find me on the other side of the engine, this is the timing tool in question. And as you can see, it basically locks around the cam phaser, and then this little hook goes in the teeth of the gear, and I'll show you how you use it in just a second. So I've got my torque wrench here, and the way you do this is basically pull back to put a preload on the cam gear. I believe it's about 35 Newton meters, and you need to hold this preload. And I'm showing you with one hand here, so it's a little tricky, but assume I'm holding the 35 Newton meter preload around the cam gear, and then with this torque wrench, you go around and you torque all 6 cam bolts, and I believe that goes to 32 Newton meters. So the idea here is you keep all the load and tension off the camshafts and the timing tools, and you can get these torqued to spec. You can see the little white marks. This is the paint pen. I just mark everything I torqued. So these are all done. But I thought I'd just do a quick recap on showing you how to basically use this. You got to do it on both sides, and that stops you from risking damaging the cam. And as just mentioned, here's the lower timing cover on. You'll have seen me press the crank pulley on. My next step here, we're gonna put the crank bolt in and get that torqued. And from here, I'm actually gonna roll the engine over. We just wanna make sure that nothing is binding. This is a good spot to do it. All my timing marks do line up, so I'm pretty confident, but this will just give me the peace of mind that actually everything's in time. We don't have any risk of valves hitting, anything like that. Now you can do this with the lower cover off, but I found that really to do it, it would be easier if I put this all together and I have a little confidence in myself that this is timed correctly. So I'm gonna get the crank bolt in. We're gonna get the last of the timing tools off. So the one on the vacuum pump, the one in the bell housing where the starter went, and the one where the crank signal is. And then we'll try and spin this thing over in just a minute. Well, I'm all geared up, and it's time to crank the torque bolt. One thing to remember, left-hand thread. Second thing, it's a torque to yield bolt. Third thing, 200 Newton meters, and then 270 degrees of rotation after that. So let's get to it. Well, that'll certainly make you break a sweat. Let me show you where I got to on this. So this is 3/4 inch drive. This is the lever I'm using. I did 200 Newton meters, which is just under 148 foot-pounds. And it's interesting, the service manual says if it's 200 Newton meters, go 270 degrees after. But then with the foot-pounds, it says if it's 148 foot-pounds, which I believe is the same as 200 Newton meters, to go to 180 degrees. I am just past 180 degrees. Under here, you can maybe, yeah, you see my little white mark. I was basically hanging on the end of this breaker bar. I'm gonna go as far as to say that's in spec. Unsure with the two different values on the torque sheet, but that certainly is extremely tight. So let's get this thing off, and I think we're at the point basically where we can roll the motor over and just make sure that everything is spinning freely.
Okay, I see movement.
I guess I should go around a few times just to be sure.
Yeah.
Really starting to come together. Here's the vacuum pump. Almost looks new, which, as you saw before, this thing was leaking pretty bad. It was covered in a ton of grime. Is it perfect? No, but has all new seals in it. Should be good for the foreseeable future. Lower timing cover looking good. Crank pulley torqued up and the outer pulley on. And the upper timing covers are now on and torqued as well. So that means time to get onto the cam actuators. They come with new O-rings, so we're gonna give those a clean up, put them in, and then there's also some cam sensors that go in. So we're gonna get those all cleaned up here on the bench so it's as nice and clean as the rest of the motor, and get those installed as well. And just like that, here they are. So actuators and sensors for the cams are on. And I think that means we got to get on with these valve covers and finally seal up the top end of the motor. So we got the first valve cover up on the bench. So you can see they're fine. They're just a little grubby. I am going to take some time to give these a good wipe down, get all the dirt and dust off of them, any potential oil residue. One, because the aesthetic of the motor will look great, well maintained, clean, which is what we're going for. And then equally on this one, we're going to replace the PCV valves. From what I read on the 5-liter, you really want to be doing this about every 30,000 miles. And this service is unknown, so we're just going to knock that out as another while we're in there. So let's get on with the cleaning and the rebuild, and we will be very close to sealing this motor up. And I almost forgot, obviously brand new valve cover gaskets and the injector spark plug seals as well. So those will be going on before we install back on the motor. We're over at the bench, and as you can see, it is fuel injector, fuel rail, and coil pack time. So we have the fully serviced and rebuilt fuel injectors here, all the new hardware here. We've got the coil packs and the fuel rails here and the supporting hardware. So quite a few pieces to put in, but certainly critical. So let's get to it. We are racing towards a complete engine, and then that means we got to just get the front of the car put back together. But I have to say, I'm super excited to be at this part of the project. Things are coming back together nicely. Obviously, quite a few parts still to go back on, but it feels like the end may be in sight. So let's get to it. Quick update here. We have the injectors in and the fuel rail in as well. Took me a couple goes to figure out the best methodology for doing this. I've not torqued the fuel rail down yet. The bolts are just nipped up, but let me take you over to the bench and I'll show you kind of what I've done, and it seemed to work well to make sure everything went in as expected. So you may notice in some of the other video, but I actually put the clips on the injectors at this step instead of once they were in the head. So that basically made sense. And then what I found actually when looking at the fuel rail, if I bring it here, we have these little slots, and they basically, sorry, here we go. They basically line with these little pieces right here. You have to slot them in. It's kind of like a guide. So actually what I'm gonna do is insert all 4 fuel injectors in where they need to go in the fuel rail. I can get the O-rings seated so they get started in here, and then we can carefully lower this down into the cylinder head and make sure obviously the injectors seat in the port as expected. And then once they're all in, we can work on putting the bolts in. So here's how I assemble it up. If we come around the side, take a quick look here. You can see the little clip here is up against the rail. The O-ring is seated. The guide is in place. And now the trick is to basically install this as an assembly down into the head. My suggestion is just go slowly. It will fit though. Well, you can disregard what I said about putting the rail together as a whole and sliding it in. That worked absolutely fine on the driver's side, but when I went to do the passenger side, it would not work for me. So I had to put the injectors in individually, then carefully seat the rail on top and push it down on top of the O-rings. So let me show you where we landed. You can kind of see here, move this out the way. There's our rail. It's torqued down to 20 Newton meters. And then here's our supply line off the high pressure pumps. It's done up here. So the only supply line we'll end up doing is this one, but this goes over the intake manifold, so it'll kind of go on near the end of the job. And I'm pretty sure we saw this already, but here's the rail on the driver's side as well. So next up is get the coil packs in. So I'm gonna work on that now. Pretty straightforward, just drop them all in on the spark plugs. Get these 8 Torx in, and we will be getting super close to having a complete motor. So let's get to it. Here they are lurking. Ignition coils are now in, all bolted up. And the same goes for the driver's side. And this means I'm rapidly running out of parts to put back on the truck as far as the powertrain. As we can see here, it is starting to look like a complete engine again. And I can't stress enough how excited I am to be at this point in the build. So let me show you what's up next as we get onto the home stretch here. And that's gonna be these guys. So these are just little brackets bolt on the back of the cylinder heads. You can't put these on until the valve covers are on. That's why I haven't installed them yet. But they hold a lot of the harness at the back. So I'm sure this is gonna be a little fiddly, but we'll get them on. And then this is thermostat housing and its supporting pieces. This is actually new. I put this on when I purchased the truck earlier in the year. So it's got a new thermostat and everything as well. So we'll be getting that on. And last but not least, it's a little grubby right now, but the intake manifold. So obviously give this the full low-tech cleanup here. New intake manifold gaskets on the underside. We'll inspect anything to make sure if there's anything that needs replacing, it gets resolved now. And we'll be dropping this back on as well. Well, time to get these brackets on, and then we can have the fun task of getting the wiring harness all hooked up on the top of the motor. I'm sure it's gonna be a lot of fun, but let's get to it. Well, it didn't take too long, and we have the harnesses on. So, less mess standing up across the back of the motor now. It's a little hard to see, but if we tuck down here, ignition coils are all plugged in, fuel injectors are all plugged in, as many of the plugs as we can on this harness are all plugged in. And then as we come down the front, cam phasers and cam position sensors are all plugged in. Harness ground plugged in. And as we move to the other side, basically seeing more of the same. Now you will notice I do have some of these harnesses here with blue tape on them. Put the blue tape there just because it makes it stand out to me, so when I'm putting everything else back on, I don't forget to plug these in as well. And one last thing, these grounds, fun fact, if these are even loose, you'll have an intermittent or completely dead cylinder bank. Ask me how I know. It's actually, and maybe a story for another day, how we got this truck so cheap in the first place. So make sure these are done up nice and tight. There's one here. This one's tricky because it lurks behind this hose. And then we got this one right here as well. All right, well, it's been a few days, been waiting on some parts, but finally the under intake manifold hose is here, as well as the coolant reservoir hose that I decided to replace. As I mentioned, that was actually the failure point that caused all the coolant to come out in the first place. So let's get over to the bench. I'll show you what I've been working on the intake, because the plan today is to get the intake back on the motor. And at that point, really we have a completely sealed up motor and it's just final reassembly. And here you find us on the bench. We have the intake upside down. That is because we wanted to replace the hose here. I've actually already installed the new one, but unlike the old one, which was weirdly crunchy inside, this one's nice. It also comes with this little heat shield, which I found interesting. And it was all fastened as it should be, clipped in place under the intake. And for any of my Jag or Land Rover enthusiasts, we all know the pesky under intake manifold coolant hoses that exist on 4 liters, 4.2s, and these 5.0s. And honestly, if you have the motor torn down, even if it's fine, spend the less than $50 and replace the hose, because these things can fail. And when they do, similar to my situation, you dump all the coolant, you can get yourself in a bad spot really quickly. And equally, sometimes it's hard to detect because it's sitting in the valley of the motor, which is certainly not where you want all that coolant. And the other thing to point out here, all new O-rings for the intake runners. The head gasket kit, I believe, was the one that came with all of these. So we should have a nice seal here, nothing to worry about as well. Here we are on the motor side. I've finally taken my tape off here, ready to accept the intake manifold. So I'm gonna do a final once over, and then we're gonna bring the intake over, get it all bolted in, and then there are a lot of connections we have to hook up. So less talking, let's get to it. And just as I was about to put the intake on, all this oil came pouring out of the intake manifold. You can see it here, dripping down. So we're gonna mop this up a little bit before we get this installed. This is a great public service announcement to say this is why you do the PCVs on these at the 30,000 mile interval. I'm sure it's very rare that people actually do this. We did do that on the truck. We did it on the valve cover. I'll point it out when we put the intake on. Super easy, costs like 20 bucks too, so anyone can do that. But this is likely why the intake is filling up with as much oil as it is. Some oil is to be expected, but I would say this is rather a large amount. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up and try again about putting the intake on. All right, well, this is all starting to come together surprisingly fast. I guess I am maybe on the home stretch now, but let me show you what I've got done, where I'm at, what's left. But this is really starting to look like a motor again, which is making me think we might be getting close to a point of starting this thing sooner rather than later. And here you find me, the motor. Intake manifold is on and torqued up. We have the fuel supply crossover in. There are lots of auxiliary hoses connected. And back here, this is where the main engine harness runs. So this is all screwed in, clipped down. As you can see, there was a few of the little straggler plugs that's plugged in here. We have this little coolant elbow here, and this is critical. It goes into the crossover at the back, so make sure you put this in and get it clipped in nicely, which then comes over here, as you can see. What else? I'm trying to think. Got this PCV line on, have the main radiator hose line on. Obviously we did the under intake. So I think, oh yeah, we have the coolant reservoir here. I need to give it a little clean, but it's bolted in. And reason for that, if we come to the floor, some of the remaining pieces we have, this is, like I mentioned, the hose that actually failed and caused the issue in the first place. This is the replacement. So we're gonna hook this up, and this mounts to the reservoir as well. So I figured let's get that in place so we know where it's gonna go. And then we got this guy as well, which I believe goes on the intake. But honestly, at that point, we are just about done. Other than the cooling pack and crash bar, I think we're really close to being able to start this. So obviously got to do fluids, things like that. But surprising to say, we might be at a point of turning the key here or pushing the start button very, very soon. So I'm gonna keep with the momentum I've got, try and get all these last bits and pieces on, and you'll find me back here in a few minutes. Hopefully we have a good update for everyone. And here we are, folks, one step closer. So, overflow tank is in, mounted, clean. So we come down here, we have the replacement lines. This one's going into the heater. This one's coming across. Follow it here and up to where it failed before. Made sure the clamp is seated really nice on here. This thing is really snug. So hopefully good there. We got the other PCV hose on. This actually goes into the air box, so that's gonna be sort of hanging out for now. The next step is gonna be working on the cooling pack. So that's gonna be the cooling fan, clutch fan, and the whole cooling pack assembly needs to come in here and mount up, and then we can really connect a lot of these supporting systems back to the motor. And really at that point, we have fundamentally a complete motor and its fluids, and then we can be starting this thing up. So time to get the cooling fan on. I think I mentioned this, but I actually purchased this quite a while ago. It's been new in the box. There was a code for a circuit fault with the original one of these. Honestly, I never had an issue with it, but I purchased this with the plan to replace it. So now is the perfect time. So this is a brand new OE, clutch fan. So we're gonna get that on, and then we'll be on to the cooling pack. And just like that, it's looking much more assembled. I have the cooling pack resting in place. I thought I could put the cooling fan on the motor and then put this in, but it really didn't want to go, just really lining up the fan in the shroud. So I basically rested the fan inside. If we come around here, it's just sitting in there right now. But we're gonna get it tightened up here. Obviously a little crooked right now, but we're gonna get that tightened up and work on basically all the different connections that go on this cooling pack. The one other observation, obviously this thing's kind of leaning forward right now. I'm gonna go ahead and put the crash bar in. This is more just for peace of mind to make sure that this thing doesn't decide to go for a walk. I really don't think it will, but like I said, I'm just gonna do this for a little bit of peace of mind. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes, put the 8 bolts in, get the crash bar on. Obviously that's one more piece of the puzzle done, and then we'll get on to hooking the whole cooling pack up next. All right guys, well, not great news. That is coolant, and it is leaking from one of my brand new replacement hoses. Let me get a little closer and you can see where it's leaking from. Unfortunately, it's not one of the connections to the truck. It's actually within the hose itself. So let me show you what I'm dealing with. So this is a brand new hose, like I said, and that's the Y piece that goes to the coolant reservoir and then into the heater hoses, the hard lines. And basically, like I said, this is brand new out of the packaging and it's leaking around this connection. So I think I'm gonna pull the hose out here, try and see what's going on and come up with a solution. Well, that was fun. So I disassembled the hose and I noticed this is using a barb fitting with 2 barbs. The one on the OEM one that I took off the truck only has 1 barb. I am suspicious that these type of spring clips don't have a place to properly seat behind the barb with this design, and basically water was weeping out. So what did I do? I took the OEM plastic fitting and then basically cobbled it together with the new hoses. So not ideal, but I'll show you where we're at. We have coolant, and we have the hoses, and most importantly, no drips on the floor. Really, my goal here right now is just to get some fluids in the truck and let it sit. Hopefully this flushes out leaks like I found with the coolant. You'll have seen I put some oil down through the filter housing. Helps with getting some lubrication down there a little bit. And then obviously filled through the valve cover as well. Now I've got new oil filter with new O-rings. I've got Vaseline on all of those too. I noticed with the old one I took out, one of the O-rings was damaged. So just want to make sure those are well lubricated going in, and also reason for pouring some oil in the filter housing just to help with the lubrication as this goes in as well. So oil filter is in. We've got, like I said, 5 quarts of oil in here. We got about 1.5 gallons, maybe a little bit more of coolant. I think we're actually closer to 2 gallons here. So not completely full, but as you can see, pretty full in the reservoir. I do have the bleeders open and it is quite full. One of the last things I'm waiting on though for fluids, power steering. Land Rover uses a cold climate power steering fluid, as I've basically drained the entire system. Not sure if you can hear that out back, but it is pouring right now. I'm running out of excuses to put the front bumper cover back on. So I got that over here in storage. I'm gonna have to dig it out, see what else needs to be done to get that installed, but I think that's gonna be the next step. And it is gonna be huge because it means this is gonna start looking like a complete vehicle again. Well, I had a little mishap. So I've been working around here and I was thinking, I swear there were crash sensors that needed to go on this crash bar at the front, and I, for the life of me, could not figure it out. And the reason for that is actually they don't go on the crash bar. They go on these guys, which were conveniently hidden in my parts pile inside the back of the truck. Certainly glad I caught this now, but it does mean a little rework. I'm gonna have to get the crash bar back off the front of this and then install these first, then put the crash bar back on. And here we have it, a little bit of a skeleton, but the complete front end now. Let me show you really as we come over here kind of how to put this all together, at least my recommendation. So we saw the other day that this structure right here needs to go in before the crash bar. This is the frame that comes down and over. It has your airbag sensor and it's part of what allows the headlight assembly to mount. Got to get those on. Then I would recommend just resting this guy in place. I would also put your crash bar in and just put the nuts in loosely. So that will give you a front structure here. And I really stress, just start everything loose so you have room to adjust. The thing I had forgotten to do is actually this slam panel on top has to go in next. This basically ties from this fender all the way across over here to this. So you get basically your top structure. It allows the radiator to get aligned right here. Obviously your hood latch mechanism goes in here, but really most importantly for aligning everything, this hardware here and here is tying that structure that we put in down here and that goes over here together, and it basically makes it, you know, as square as it can be to your vehicle. And you have to get that done before you put the headlights in. It'll make your life way easier. And as you can see over here, the top of the headlight actually sits on top. So there's not much you can do until you get this in. So next up, I'm gonna work on the air boxes. They gotta go back in. We gotta get the air filters in. We gotta actually put the intake itself on, and the little, you know, corrugated pieces to connect them all up with the mass airflow sensors. So I'm gonna work on that. And then the final step really here is gonna be put the bumper cover and grille back on. So we have an airbox in. So you can see, cleaned it up pretty nicely. I still have a little bit of scale in here. Not sure how far I'm gonna go with cleaning that up, but this is all plugged in, ready to go. And then when we come over this side, just finishing up this one. So I gotta put the lid on here with the MAF, and then the air boxes will be in. And really that just leaves the air intake. I think I'm gonna hold off on putting that on, and this is why. Right here, this is the bleeder for the coolant system. And it blocks it. And right now, I have about 2 gallons of coolant in the motor, but I think it holds closer to 3. I have the car kind of lifted up at an angle right now because of the other work I'm doing. So I'm gonna just leave this off until we get it back on the ground and level, just because if more air comes out, I wanna make sure I can get as much coolant in the system before we start it for the first time. So I'm gonna get this last cover on the other airbox, and then we're gonna move on to putting the front bumper and grille assembly on. And just like that, it looks like a Range Rover again. Bring you over to the engine compartment. See, we have the other airbox and mass airflow on. I do have the inlet tubes here just resting in place. I do not have the air intake on. This right here is one of the bleeders for the cooling system, and I cannot access that with the intake on. So until the truck is flat on a, you know, level ground, I don't want to put the intake on because I'm suspicious that I will probably have to put at least another half gallon of coolant in. All right, guys, well, that's where we're going to wrap today's video. I already see how long the video is getting, and I think this is a great place to stop. As you can see, I just need to finish bleeding the coolant system, get the Range Rover back on the ground, and then we are ready to start it. And what better place to start it than our next upcoming video? I am sure there's going to be some surprises with that after tearing the engine down to a complete short block, changing all those little bits and pieces in there that we've done, and then putting it all back together. But definitely stay tuned. So the first start is always an exciting one, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from the build process. And if you are new to the channel and you found your way here because of the Land Rover content, there is plenty more to come. I am going through this and making it as good as new, and I want to share all the tips and tricks that I've learned while doing this. Also, for my Jag lovers, next video most likely will actually be on the XJ. I know I've said it's been coming, but it's in the shop and we will be doing the whole front end overhaul, so stay tuned for that. And if you like the other cars you've seen in the background, don't worry, plenty more to come on those too. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.